My video is frozen.
Okay, we're recording.
Great. As chair of the SAU 21 Joint School Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I'm confirming that we are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the SAU 21 Joint School Board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing the following phone number: 646-876-9923, or by clicking on the website which was listed in the agenda. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing the meeting, including how to access the meeting using Zoom or telephonically. Instructions have also been provided on the website of the SAU 21 office at www.sau21.org. If anybody has a problem, please call 603-926-8992, extension 103, or email at revans@sau21.org. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law.
Greg Parrish.
Present. Family in and out of room.
Jason Farias.
Present. Family in and out of the room.
Jill Swayze.
Present. Families around.
John Bailey.
Here, families in and out of the room.
Aaron Stanton.
Present. Family.
Greg Duffy.
Present. Alone.
Martin Tavishian. Nermina Peterson.
Present. Alone.
Tom Von Jess.
Present. Alone.
Forrest Carter.
Present. Alone.
Jennifer Hubbard.
I'm here at a campground.
Jessica Brown. Kelly Huber.
Here.
Mike Rabideau.
Here in the woods.
Jim Keim.
I'm here and alone.
Rebecca Burdick.
Here, alone.
Sharon Gordon.
Here and alone.
Heidi Terracina.
Present with some family in and out.
Henry Marsh.
Here, alone.
Leslie LaFond.
Here, family locked in the basement.
Tony Delano.
Here, family in and out.
And I think we just got Jessica Brown joining us. Jessica, is that you?
Yes.
Okay. I have the roll call taken.
I'm at work with people in and out.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica. I have the roll call taken.
Great, thank you, Rhonda. Bill, do you want to take us through the return to school plan?
Sure. I'm gonna share my screen, I think. Everyone can see that? Yes, Rhonda, just give me a thumbs up because I can see you. You're one of the people I can see. Thank you. So thank you for doing this on such short notice, and my apologies for needing to do this on such short notice. As the chairs know from our time getting together with them earlier this week, we have encountered a series of continuing to evolve situations that, as I indicated, I think in the email, have made our in-person models very difficult to continue to consider. And what we're going to do is walk you through tonight where we are. I want to start by just applauding the people who I work with at the SAU and the principals for the work that they've done to implement the models that we have in place in each of the districts to date. There's incredible work going on. I think you'll see tonight against very difficult odds. I want to say here that I'm really proud that we were charged by this board from the beginning to try to do as much in person as we could. And other than a very few districts in the southeast part of the state, we are among the very few districts that have been able to get this far with any kind of in-person modeling, and I think we're all pretty proud of that. And we don't take coming to you tonight at all lightly, but there are some pretty significant financial and/or staffing and/or programmatic issues that I just think our board members need to be aware of before we go any further. And I don't know how I advance. Oh, there's how I advance it. Okay. David, did I just go too far?
No, you're in the right spot. You're looking at, oh, now you are.
I don't know how to go back.
Hit the back arrow. There you go. You're on slide number 2.
Okay, I got it. So these are, just for everyone's information, these are the models that we've been working to implement in terms of tonight's conversation. Particularly, we're going to spend our time tonight on the in-school models at Barnard, Lincoln Ackerman, both K-8, and the pre-K to 4, it's actually 5, where we ended up at Northampton, and pre-K to 4 at Seabrook. Those are the models. And you'll notice, and it's one of the issues that we're going to spend some time on tonight, one of the key issues is the Remote Learning Academy that has proven to be somewhat problematic. Just in terms of where we've spent our time and the time that we got together, August 5th, we met as a joint board to talk about the recommendations. Over the next 2 days, we had 5 board meetings where these plans were approved. We immediately started with a learning model survey of families from the 11th through the 17th. On the 18th, we sent that information, which was somewhat complete in some schools and not terribly complete in other schools, to principals. Between the 19th and the 21st, they contacted families who didn't respond to the survey, and they verified grade levels and class sizes. Because, and again, one of the things that we're going to spend some time on tonight, they had already done a lot of work in terms of looking at classrooms in their buildings, taking a look at the 6-foot social distancing per CD or social distancing per CDC guidance, and trying to figure out exactly how many students they could accommodate in classrooms. And they spent time, as they began to verify people, figuring out whether those would work. On August 21st, they vetted building plans, or we worked with them to vet plans, layouts, supplies, facilities, busing, schedules. We began to identify RLA teachers, including the important issue of verifying that they were licensed in particular grade levels, excuse me, and could teach in the Remote Learning Academy. And the nurses who've just done yeoman's work, consolidated and vetted re-entry protocol for staff. 24th and 25th, we met with board chairs to discuss some complications with the RLA. And we continued to recruit for potential RLA teachers. And I might as well put this on the table here. You'll see some more detail later, because we did not, from our staff, we could not identify the appropriate number of RLA teachers in order to run the remote learning academy for those parents who indicated that that's where they wished to have their children. So even though we had quite some number of requests for accommodations, they didn't match up as cleanly as we would have liked, and we were left with some holes in the teaching force for the remote learning academy. On the 26th, David and Caroline, I believe, met with identified RLA teachers to discuss the program and concerns. And what's been a continuing function through all of this is to process and verify ADA and FMLA requests. And I saw that Charlene is in the audience, and Charlene and Holly deserve a lot of credit. And I don't want this to come across as a number that was approved or any kind of number other than processed. They have considered and worked with well over 100 people on our staff from pre-K through 12 to look at those types of requests. And again, after we met on August 5th, I think I wrote to you soon thereafter and said that we were hit with the information that Portsmouth had gone to a remote model, and then Exeter had gone to a remote model. And that led to increased numbers of these kinds of requests around the FFRCA requests and employees identifying child care issues because of their own children's schooling situations. And we spent time responding to changing staffing landscape largely related to neighboring school districts. That's what I just mentioned. Why am I having trouble doing that? Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, that's why, because I didn't have my cursor on the slides. So, what kinds of issues have we encountered? Well, so, and this is not nearly an exhaustive list, but you'll see some more as we go through this. At Northampton School, we've seen sibling requests corresponding to the 5th grade model, meaning people interested in coming in. David, do you want to expand on that one? Sorry, the Northampton.
Sorry, can you repeat that, Bill?
Because I know you put these in here. The Northampton, the sibling request corresponding to the 5th grade model.
So yeah, I mean, these are just some anecdotes of things that we never could have assumed or never could have predicted that are coming to fruition. Each school has kind of its own idiosyncrasies, but this is an example at Northampton. When we opened up the face-to-face learning to 5th grade, we had a family actually that had chosen the homeschool route. And then once the 5th grade was open, obviously they had a sibling in a lower grade and they realized that they could get both kids in. So there was an unanticipated accumulation of students. You know, Bill will go into this in a little bit, but it's a very interesting scenario when a parent requests after the fact, hey, can I come to a face-to-face environment? And we were advised by legal counsel that it's not a very advisable answer to say, no, you can't come back face-to-face.
Right.
So we find ourselves in these weird predicaments with respect to enrollment.
Thank you. At Barnard School, we've had face-to-face class size issues, meaning we are at or have exceeded the numbers that we can put in a particular classroom. And so, you know, we're at that at or above that number in certain grade levels. We're also struggling given our custodial staff there with identifying the appropriate amount of staff to adhere to the cleaning protocols because of the unique nature of Barnard School. Lincoln Ackerman, we've encountered the situation of homeschool participation in UA programs. So board members may be aware that homeschoolers have the right under both state law and your policies to request that they can come in for certain things in the in-school curriculum in a normal situation. None of those laws anticipated the situations that we're in now, and yet we've had homeschoolers say, I'd like for my child to participate in music or art or whatever, therefore pushing us into potential numbers of exceeding the cap and mixing our cohorts, something we were trying to avoid. At Seabrook, we've encountered issues with face-to-face class size in upper elementary grades. which are at or in some cases above capacity. Other physical limitations, students continue to register within SAU 21. I've had contact from principals in the last 2 days of people choosing to come back, or people, the normal move-ins that we have in some districts. And we always anticipate at certain districts, I won't go through them here, that we're going to have a registration bump at the outset of the year in at least some of those districts. We've had a huge variability of homeschool requests and reversals throughout the last month. So again, you know, particularly with this last survey, we needed to base decisions on those data. And people had indicated certain things to us about what they were going to do in terms of the remote learning academy, in terms of homeschooling, in terms of a private school placement, but they have the right to change their mind. And when they saw what we were going to try to do, many of them did. And so, David, you have the number 31. That refers to...
Right. So, I mean, I think it's clear that these numbers are tight. We are, you know, within 1 or 2 students in kind of all these different scenarios, whether we're remote or face-to-face. The 31 students are the number of students that actually were involved in a transfer one way or another in homeschool. A lot of them actually applied for the homeschool, like Bill said, and then rescinded that after they found out what our plans were. So a total of 31 though. And that makes a huge difference when we're talking such tight margins.
Right. Thank you. We've received changes in family and student choices for remote and in person. Some movement back and forth, but mainly toward in person. Legal counsel has advised us that we cannot require students to enter the RLA at registration. We thought that one strategy we might use in order to continue to look at the in-school, the in-person model and in-person numbers was that once we reached the cap, if people registered, we would tell them, we have something available for you. It's the Remote Learning Academy. Legal counsel has advised us that we cannot do that. They have the option for both, even if they push us over the cap. As class sizes exceeded our physical space plans, which of course are based on CDC guidance, we face the possibility of creating unsafe student environments. I spent most of my day today with legal counsel from the School Boards Association and our legal counsel dealing with this issue of once we've adopted certain guidelines, again, from the medical community, and set those numbers, the types of issues that we may face should we exceed those numbers. And we'll talk more about those later. I just want to mention here, and I probably personally have not done as good a job with this for you, for the public, as I should have. I've heard a lot of things said about teachers over the last month that I've found really pretty distasteful. And I just want to summarize these pieces here. These are federal laws where teachers and, quite frankly, many other categories of employees have rights under federal law when they can document certain things to be considered for certain types of accommodations, which can include remote teaching. So we have seen some number of requests under the Americans with Disabilities Act, meaning somebody believes they have an underlying health condition. A doctor signs off on that underlying health condition saying they need some sort of modification to their program. It may be a remote teaching environment. It may be additional PPE. It can be all kinds of things, but there's a lot of work that goes into each one of those. And again, through our HR department with the employee. And then we have to deem whether we can provide an appropriate accommodation, a reasonable accommodation. If we can, let's say it's a request for a remote. If we can, we do. We make those arrangements. It might be in the Remote Learning Academy. It might be remotely working in the school where in-person instruction is going on. There's a myriad of kinds of things that can be done. But in some cases, we can't. And when we can't make a reasonable accommodation for that person, they still have the possibility that they can stay out because they've been deemed to have an underlying health condition that would keep them from coming in for in-person work. And then they can take appropriate leave, whether it's unpaid or if they have sick time, paid leave. The Family Medical Leave Act works for situations where someone in the family may have some kind of underlying condition that requires a short-term leave for that person to care for them, and we've had requests of those type. But as I've said to you a number of times, too many times, some of you probably believe, this third one, particularly under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, particularly as it concerns people and their own children and the school districts in which they reside, the fact that we have a number of different models and that some of those models came about later on in the conversation has caused people concerns. Now, to our employees' credit, many of them have been able to find ways to work out those accommodations for themselves, for their children, whether it's through their spouse, whether it's through others in their family, whether it's some other kind of daycare or whatever. They've worked it out and they're coming back to work. Others have not been able to work it out or have only been able to partially work it out. And so they have these leave requests in that, again, if we can find reasonable accommodations for them, we need to find those reasonable accommodations. And then we have other kinds of requests, but mainly they fall into those three categories.
Hey, Bill, it's
Yes.
Tom. Sorry to interrupt you, but I want to put a fine point on the FFCRA if I can ask a couple questions.
Please.
So my understanding on the FFCRA is this goes beyond teachers. It's for everybody, right? So it's
Yes.
anyone who's employed. So it's not teacher specific.
That's
one.
correct. So we have EAs and others as well. Yes. In our situation, yes.
Yeah, but myself, right? Any employee of any employer who runs into this, it's the same situation, not just teachers and educators. We're looking
That's
at it
correct.
from that lens, but this is everybody.
That's correct.
Second thing, I want to just make sure that we're clear about what the FFCRA does for employees. So if there's a school that goes remote and you've got underage children, then you can put in the request to your employer. And if you can't give an accommodation, if the employer can't give an accommodation, then the employee is entitled for 12 weeks of leave at reduced pay. I think it's 60%. Is that right?
It's 2/3. Yes.
All right. So 60%. Okay. So 2/3 for 12 weeks.
Yes.
Okay. And then at that, and it can be intermittent. It doesn't have to be consecutive. It can
That's
be
correct.
a day here, a half day here, what have you. So this could go
That's
on
correct.
for a long time. So I want to make sure that there's 2 points. One is what this means, because we need to figure out a way to make this work for all families.
Yes.
It's not teacher specific.
That's correct.
And we can't find enough subs, no doubt, to accommodate everyone that might need a request. If we said, we can't, we need you in, and then they said, okay, we're taking 2/3 of pay. We don't have the subs to bring in, and there's budgetary issues as well.
Yes.
So I
Both of
think
those
we'll
things
labor
are
the
true.
point,
Yes.
but I think it's important to really understand
you.
the impact of this.
I appreciate your questions. Yes, those are really helpful. Thank you. And the other thing is, remember that as of right now, that particular law expires on December 31st. As of right now, unless it's extended, and we haven't heard that it will be, but it could be. But December 31st for right now.
Good, thank you.
And thank you. So David, I want you to explain this, but these are, at the end of the day, these are the remote requests as they stand today and school by school. So David, I know you wanted to say more than a word about this.
Yeah, sure. So this is where we stand with respect to, enrollments and staffing in the RLA. I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of the process we went through in figuring this out. Just a couple of highlights for you or observations for you. One is this bottom row. And that the idea that every one of our schools has significant requests of remote learning academy students, it really screams one thing, and that thing is we're tied in this together. For example, if the remote learning academy doesn't work, Southampton's got 20 kids that they're not going to be able to put in face-to-face. Likewise with LAS and NHS. I think it illustrates the point that if the remote learning academy is not viable and doesn't work in terms of staffing, then we kind of all lose that other face-to-face option. The other thing that I wanted to point out is up on the kindergarten line there. Right now, we have a total of 26 requests. But one thing that we have to keep in mind is the number of fresh kindergarten registrations that we're going to see day one of school. So, and that could happen in other grades, but I know it particularly happens at the kindergarten level. So it's something that we're trying to keep tabs on and actually and understand and include in our planning. So another thing that's important for you guys to understand is grades 5 through 8. So the working model for Remote Learning Academy would be, we'd be able to create it for grades K through 4. And we'll talk about what that means and the complications involved in just that in a little bit. But grades 5 through 8, all these other requests, the notion is that those kids, those requests from Northampton, LAS, Southampton, would be able to funnel into Seabrook Middle. And in grades specifically 6 through 8, they'd be able to funnel into the remote sections of Northampton schools. So that's how we would cover grades 5 through 8 in the Remote Learning Academy. But the onus of our planning has been on grades K through 4. And obviously the large thing to put out there is just the disparity in numbers across our districts. Seabrook totaling, sorry for the small font, looks like 107 requests right now. Basically means that in a scenario where we had to cut down on grade levels or take a particular district into a remote environment, it's obvious that the other districts wouldn't be able to absorb those kind of numbers. So we get into scenarios where if we have to go remote with a given district, it would have to be Seabrook. And that would come with its own set of equity issues where one school's looking at, a K through 2 face-to-face option, then other schools had a K through 8 face-to-face option. So those are some of the kind of large picture complications that we're seeing with respect to the requests.
Yeah. I just want to add something I've said from the beginning on this. From the very first survey that we did, it was individuals choosing the remote academy that let us consider in person. Without those numbers, and you may look at numbers and say, well, those numbers are kind of small from our district, but it's those numbers that allowed us to even consider doing in person in those schools.
Dave, were those numbers corrected for the 31 that you referred to earlier on an earlier slide?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't see who's asking the question, but this has been a running total that I've been popping back and forth with front office folks in all our districts.
Okay,
it's as accurate as I know it to be, like as of yesterday.
Good.
David, do you want to talk about the RLA staffing?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't realize you moved the slide. So in order to, accommodate the 177 requests that we just showed, we identified 9 teaching sections is basically what that would amount to in terms of being able to put them into sections and making sure that they had a teacher. So within the SAU over the last week, we were able to identify 6 educators who held the appropriate licensure to work this through. There have been issues with that, and I'll just be transparent about those issues. One is that the teachers we found, as Bill said, they weren't exactly matching up perfectly with the grade level. In other words, if you had been a 6th grade teacher and you hold a K through 8 license, you might have been pulled into the 2nd grade in the Remote Learning Academy. So that's a pretty significant shift in responsibility for a given teacher. Even though you hold the proper credential, it's something that, that takes some transition and it takes some getting used to, right? The other thing it did or does is as we pull these teachers from the Remote Learning Academy out of our face-to-face environments, it, for lack of better words, increases the density of students per teacher in the face-to-face environment, right? It has impacted the corresponding class sizes in that face-to-face environment. So the trick is to find the sweet spot between being able to pull enough teachers to get this thing to run and not creating a scenario where the face-to-face environment is unsafe for our kids or too crowded. And so that's the kind of the needle we've been trying to thread throughout the last week or so. We also have, of course, the shifting sands of this whole environment. Within this time frame, we've experienced one teacher resignation who was actually involved prior to that in the Remote Learning Academy. So it actually has forced us to play a little swap with other educators and who's going to be doing what face-to-face. So, you know, you're getting the picture of just shifting sands of a lot of change that we're trying to manage. So two options to remediate kind of the issues that we're seeing in terms of being able to pull enough teachers out of the face-to-face environment to work for the RLA. One is obviously to add teachers, and the other one would be to reduce the face-to-face grade levels. So, you know, both of them have considerable problems associated with them. So with regard to reducing the face-to-face grade levels, we considered a Seabrook Elementary K through 2 model, where it was only K through 2 would be face-to-face, and then 3 and 4 would go remote online. And then in those models, though, we have a significant equity issue, like I said, with, you know, a Northampton or an LAS parent being able to go K through 8, and then a Seabrook being given the option of a K through 2. The other thing that happens there, which is, it's pretty complicated, but as if we went remote in the higher elementary grades in Seabrook Elementary, that actually affects some of the parents that we have working within the SAU. So for example, if I pulled out Seabrook Elementary 4th grade, that means a parent over in, you know, Lincoln Ackerman, for example, who's also working there, wouldn't be able to work for Lincoln Ackerman. So we have a very complicated web of interactivity that's going on there. So that was reducing the grade levels. The second thing we thought of doing was hiring staff, being able to get more teachers to man the Remote Learning Academy. And that brings us to the next slide.
Dave, can I ask one quick question? It's very short. Were all those teachers in the Remote Learning Academy ADA, FMLA, or FFCRA eligible, or were some people that requested to be in the Remote Learning Academy but maybe didn't qualify for one of those accommodations?
Tom, it was a mix.
I can answer that. Yeah, they were not all. Some of them were in schools, I'll say Seabrook, where we had a larger number that requested the Remote Learning Academy, and it allowed us to extract them from the grade level. But most were eligible. And some were a combination of they were the right grade level and they were eligible.
So we can get to this later on, but in the end, when we talk about the final recommendation, part of what I'm looking at is when you got the final numbers in, did you look to make sure that all those that qualify for ADA, FMLA, and FFCRA, their accommodation was RLA first?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we.
That was the very first look, Tom.
Okay,
Yes.
Before we move on, can I ask a quick question? It's about 2 slides over. I raised my hand, but I'm not sure if you noticed.
I can only see 2 or 3 people, so
I know my camera's not working. I don't know why it won't let me go on camera.
Okay.
I tried. It's all of a sudden not working. It's Kelly from Seabrook.
Yep. Hi.
Hi. So can we go back over just 2 slides real quick? Because I have a question about the
I'd love to do that if David would tell me how.
Okay.
How do I go
Right
back?
arrow, left arrow, left arrow.
I'm sorry. Yep, that one. Okay, so this is the remote learning, and this is what this is obviously what the teachers were requesting, not.
No, these are students.
Yeah, no, these are student requests.
Okay, so the remote request was students.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so then Seabrook has a higher amount of students requesting remote learning.
That's correct.
So wouldn't that mean that we would have less in person?
Yes. Well, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So if we have higher remote requests, then we would have less in-person requests. Therefore, we should have enough space and teachers to
It's a
accommodate
great question.
each person?
Thank you so much for asking it. It's a perfect question. And the answer is everything else being equal, that's correct. Except everything else isn't equal. You have larger class sizes than the other schools in the SAU to begin with. And so even when you move 20 first graders out, you're still left with, let's say 60. Let's say there were 80 kids in that grade. There are in some, I'll use that as the example. And so there were 5 teachers and 60 kids, but we just extracted one of them, which took us to 4 teachers and 60 kids. If we're looking at class numbers of 14, 12, whatever it may be, it put us right up against the number anyhow by extracting that teacher. So you've hit on one of the core issues that we've encountered as we've done this, is those numbers. You're right, those numbers extracted for the Remote Learning Academy at Seabrook Elementary are significant, but you have larger class sizes than the other districts in the SAU.
So there isn't, I'm just asking this because I don't know. So then there is not another teacher through the whole SAU, just one more teacher that could go to Seabrook? I'm just asking. Or maybe a middle school teacher that could go to the elementary? Because it really looks like to me that we have almost triple compared to the other schools that are requesting remote.
So if I understand your question correctly, I can't transfer teachers. These are 5 separate districts. I can't transfer teachers other than what we're doing with the Remote Learning Academy from the Lincoln Ackerman School to the Seabrook School. I don't have that ability. It's 5 different budgets. So I don't have that ability to mix and match teachers to balance out class sizes, number one. And number two, though, no, it didn't extract enough. As I said in my example, the easiest example I can give you is 80 students who were going to be spread among 5 teachers in grade whatever. 20 of them go to the Remote Learning Academy. I need to take one of those teachers because I don't have the teachers in the other locations, because you can see the numbers are smaller at those schools that have gone to the Remote Learning Academy. So it's almost got to be by default, we got to start the conversation at Seabrook because of the numbers, but the class sizes were significantly enough higher that when you do that, it begins to create another problem, and that is the number of kids that would be in that 4th grade classroom or that 3rd grade classroom.
Just a quick point on that, Bill. Everything Bill said was correct. The only thing I would add is actually from a proportionality standpoint, Southampton and Seabrook Elementary are pretty much in tandem. It's Southampton would be 20 requests out of, I don't know what they have, 85 students, roughly a quarter. So the numbers are certainly lower, Kelly, at LAS and NHS, but proportionally speaking, Southampton and SES are around the same.
I know. I mean, I'm looking at these numbers and we're like 20, 107, 12, 107, 38, 107. Wow. That's huge.
Yeah, it's a big school.
Yeah.
With big class sizes.
It's a quarter of your student population, right? And what David's point is it's also a quarter of Southampton's student population.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question. It's a great one. So we were here, and what we spent a little bit of time talking to board chairs, and I'm only going to concentrate on this last column. What we talked about the other day is that at the end of the day, when we got through this, we were 3 teachers short. And we don't have funding for 3 teachers to teach in the Remote Learning Academy. In other words, if we were going to continue to run K through 4 in the Remote Learning Academy, we needed 3 teachers. Now, in the conversation with them the other day, we took this through sort of a first trimester kind of an experience, you know, but and that's one way to look at it. That's very short term, and we did. But quite frankly, we need to have a conversation about what this costs if it continues, right? And what it costs if it continues, and again, you know, if it doesn't continue, there's ramifications of all this, right? If it doesn't continue, if we can't say to somebody, well, this is for X period of time, it begins to limit the number of people we may have who are even interested in these positions. If it's for a year, we have a broader group, but we don't know if we need them for the entire year. But if it gets past a certain number of weeks, they go on the schedule in terms of the way they're paid, all those kinds of things. So what we did is I'll call it a worst case scenario. Some would call it a realistic scenario. And that is, we took those 3 positions and costed them out for the year. You know, we began to look even in those conversations on Monday around where would districts identify the funding in order to pay for these. Because again, if you don't run a remote learning academy, first of all, you have a number of students who you're saying you're not going to serve, and that's not an option for you. You can't do that. Second of all, you may drive some people back to the in-person model, and if you do, you're going to exacerbate the numbers of students that you have in those grade levels and create more of a problem for you in terms of not being able to run that grade level. So as David said earlier, not only do your districts hang together on this, and I hope the Remote Learning Academy piece here demonstrates that, but these decisions hang together. One decision drives people to make some decision that could present a whole nother set of problems for you in a particular grade level. So that's a cost. And what we did, Matt, do you want to explain here how you sort of just took a stab at costing this out as to what that might look like for each of the 4 elementary districts?
Sure. So, in short, we took the enrollment for the Remote Learning Academy. That's K through 8. Pre-kindergarten is not included. And then we allocated based on percentage. So you'll look at the total cost of the remote learning program is $1.25 million. And that encompasses just the staffing, so the teachers. However, each individual district are contributing teachers in this model. So as Bill and Dave alluded to, Seabrook contributed the bulk of the teachers at $745,000. Hampton Falls is only contributing 12 students, but 1 teacher at $126,000. I'll also note that these numbers are based on the full cost, so that includes benefits, so that's health insurance, that's retirement contribution at 17%. So you may see we're not paying. I just want to make that clear. That is not someone's salary. That is the total cost of a person, of a staff member. And then Northampton and Seabrook are splitting a teacher as far as that cost when we look at bringing in those middle level grades into their enriched virtual academy. So our existing staff contributes $925,000 of the 1.25. The 3 additional teachers that we need to hire in order to staff the program is assuming a teacher at an 8M step. So that's where we came up with these assumptions. I just want to point out, so you'll see Hampton Falls is actually a negative number. That's because they're contributing a very low number of students versus the teacher that they're providing. So they would actually be owed funds from the other districts that are offer or are utilizing more students. So for example, Northampton has more students relative to the teachers that they're providing to the program. So they have a higher cost. I'd be happy to answer any questions in regard to these numbers.
Let me just say that because we're trying to put this together, and I told you these numbers evolve every day. You see a different number under the RLA enrollment than you saw on the last slide, and that's because that's how those numbers have moved between the times that we either created these slides or utilized the numbers from. Again, this is to give you sort of rough estimates of this, and also to show you where sort of the 6 teachers are coming from, and that we have 3 positions that we'd have to identify yet in order to run the RLA. And we have not gone back and sort of, well, we have in some cases, we looked at sub budgets. We've looked at other places where we might be able to come up with the funding to provide the remote learning academy, but there's no specific recommendation as to what that would look like right now.
Oh, Kelly Huber has her hand raised again.
Okay.
So I don't know if this is going to sound like a crazy question, but somebody asked me if I would ask this question. And the only reason why that I say that is because of the question I asked regarding sending, other teachers to other schools. But what has anyone considered maybe possibly busing the students from Seabrook to the schools that have a low number of face-to-face students?
So that's a great question. So that would require something that doesn't exist now in terms of those inter-district arrangements, since they're different districts, number one. Number two, that assumes there's space. What we said on an earlier slide is that many of our classrooms, we have classrooms in every district right now that are either right at the maximum number that we can take, or they're over in terms of the in-person.
Okay.
So the answer to your question might be that it's possible on an individual basis if we had those kind of relationships between districts that don't presently exist.
Thank you.
Yep.
Jessica Brown has her hand raised.
Sorry, I can't see, so thank you, Rhonda. Just continue to do that if you would.
Yeah. Jessica Brown.
Hi, just one question. The slide that we're looking at for the RLA staffing costs, is this new staff? This isn't including utilizing the staff that we have?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jessica. So we've identified 6 people from existing staff. And where you see that existing cost, that shows you the amount of money associated with those people. It doesn't show you the people. I mean, obviously you look at that and you say, clearly most of those people are from Seabrook, but there is a Hampton Falls staff member and I believe a Northampton staff member in there. But that's the existing. We need 3 additional people in order to run this model.
And none of the folks that requested FMLA, ADA, or FFCRA are eligible to do this. Is that right?
We have exhausted those sources. We've exhausted those sources with respect to teaching staff for the Remote Learning Academy. We have other people with other certification, other specialist certifications or whatever, but not people who are elementary certified. We've gone through all those, Tom, as I mentioned to you earlier in that question, and we've exhausted that as a possibility.
Thank you.
And in fact, from there, we've gone and looked at where there might be capacity at each school within a grade level for people who didn't request that, right? But can we assign someone from, Northampton 2nd grade, I'm making that up, right? Because we need a 2nd grade teacher, and is there capacity in the Northampton 2nd grade in order to get the people that we need? And the answer is no, there's none. And someone asked a question earlier that I didn't answer, and that is with respect to even looking at the middle school in a place like Seabrook. Are there people that could come down in order to help with the class size issues? And the answer there is, well, then you're going to compromise the middle level program. And you're going to compromise what those students receive in terms of their academic subjects and the schedule that the middle level is going to maintain. So we've exhausted all of that before we would even think about saying, in order to run this model, we need 3 people.
So if I'm getting this right, we don't have enough teachers to be in school model, and we don't have enough teachers for remote learning.
And the reason,
come back, or
and the reason that seems that's very frustrating to us, and the answer that I can give you is yes. And one of the reasons for that has to do with well, it's not always true in the in-person. It's true in enough classrooms where it's a problem. And the problem is that is what we're looking at in terms of the group sizes in those in-person models. And you take a classroom where you traditionally have said, we're going to do X or Y or Z in terms of, we're going to have 5 sections, Jessica, as you've said forever at Seabrook in say K-2. And we're going to have 70 to 80 kids and we're going to run it like that. And you all of a sudden say, okay, when we're going to social distance in this classroom, when we're going to follow CDC and other medical guidance, and we're going to socially distance, now we can put, and I'm making this number up, now we can put 14 kids in that classroom. Right? So that's different because you've run that classroom with 18 to 22. So you can get some number off in this, but to create what we've discovered over the last month is to get the perfect match didn't always happen. The perfect match of the number of kids and whatever. And they're moving, as David said earlier in the slide where we looked at some of the things that are continuing to happen, it continues to be a moving target. And you know, one of the things in your district that we're concerned about is we look at the history in terms of the normal kind of registration that comes in the couple days before school starts. And so first of all, we have no idea if that history is going to play out this year or not, right? Because this is a year unlike any other. But we suspect that there's some registration coming. And so what if we're at the number, say it's 15 per classroom, and in a particular grade level, and we add 5 kids in that grade level on day 1? What do we do with them? We can't tell them to go to Remote Learning Academy. We've been told that by legal counsel. You can't go over the number because if you go over the number, you create potential liability for the district. And you create potential of people not social distancing and the ramifications that come with that. So what do you do? And that's the set of problems that we're dealing with in a nutshell.
Yeah, I just didn't expect to have, I guess, this problem with the remote learning. I thought we would probably be in better shape than we are. How many students per teacher are you giving for like remote learning?
It ranges from, David, 13 to 20, depending on the grade level.
I think the lowest is 13, the highest is 23.
Right. So the grade level where we have 26, we have 2. The grade level where we had 20, I think we had 1. Is that right? Am I getting those remotely right? No pun intended.
Yeah, so the 26 was 2, the 32 was 2, the 26 was 2, the 40 was 2, and the 23 was 1.
Right.
How many hours of live learning will students be getting? Is there some way, if we really ran into an issue, that it could be half days? You know, some students go in the morning, some students go in the afternoon for the remote learning. I don't know how many hours exactly that the children will be utilizing the staff.
Do you want
to answer that, David?
Yeah, so we're actually, I think it would help to do the next slide.
Okay,
so
great.
Actually, Bill, I have a question. Greg Parrish.
Oh.
I
Let's
need a
hold,
little.
Jessica, hold on one second, Greg. Can we hold on
Sorry,
to your
Jessica.
question for a second, Jessica? We'll come to the next slide.
Thank you. I guess I'm a little unclear here. A moment ago, David said that we have teachers that are certified K through 8. And if you have an 8th grade teacher who are a teacher who normally teaches 8th grade, but it's needed in a 2nd grade environment in possibly RLA environment or a teaching model, that's a difficult transition. Now, I get that it's a difficult transition, but we're in crisis mode here. And why can't we just make the tough decision that, you know, maybe for the first trimester, that 8th grade teacher may have to do that to get us over the gap here?
Greg, let me answer that. We have. David didn't say we didn't do it.
Okay.
David said it's difficult. David said somebody who's taught 6th grade for their entire career and now is going to be asked to teach remotely 3rd grade, that's a tough thing for them to do and requires some assistance and some support. We've done it. We have at least, I'll say here, you know, and not go much further in a public meeting, but we have 2 instances where they're rather difficult transitions, but that's where the people who requested accommodations have been assigned.
Okay. So we have done that. Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Greg.
Okay. Now.
Oh yeah.
David,
so
you want to do this slide and then we'll get to Jessica's question as well.
Right. So Jessica was asking about split sessions, which is we went down that road. So one of the ways, obviously, we're trying to look at this is by being creative with the Remote Learning Academy and minimizing the number of staff needed to handle that group of students. But it's a sizable group of students. So we went through a number of iterations. We went through split sessions, which Jessica brought up, and it would be a model. It would be far from what we promised. The other issue with split sessions is it turns the teacher into a deliverer of content. There's really no opportunity to do any small group work or any of the things that we talked about, and we sold as part of this plan. So that those are some of the issues with split sessions. We talked about increased section sizes. We talked about reducing the grade levels in the RLA. In other words, looking at just K through 2, for example, that came with its own set of issues. We actually talked about doing grade bands rather than grade levels in the Remote Learning Academy. And at the end of the day, you start getting these scenarios where you've got kids coming in from possibly 4 districts. They are not learning face-to-face, they're learning online. The teacher's learning to teach online. And then we've got the added complexity of multiple grade levels in a given 23-person class. These are very, very difficult situations and far from what we promised as part of the RLA, but also far from an ideal educational environment for moms and dads, for parents, for kids, and for teachers as well. Just to hit off the other 2 bullets, just so they get said, we looked at designing a remote district, designating a remote district that inevitably would be a district that would act as basically a magnet for the other districts. That's rife with equity issues, as we all know, and it would affect the ability of working parents who had kids at that district to actually participate and work at our other schools. We had that issue pop up quite a bit. Lastly, in an effort to try to reduce these costs, we looked at the asynchronous platforms, and we all know the story of VLAX, but we looked at Edmentum, Schoology, those kind of asynchronous plug and play kind of programs. They all have a cost component, and I can't imagine plugging a first grader into something like that and calling it effective. So yes, Jessica, we tried to get as creative as possible in terms of the hours that the kids were seeing the teachers, how they were grouped, how they were sorted, but all of them obviously had their own shortcomings.
And the other thing that David didn't say here, but has been a centerpiece of our discussion, is if the RLA for whatever number of kids, 170, I'll just use as the number, in K-4 is not a good experience, there are some parents who chose it who will come back to the face-to-face experience. If that happens, there are some who are there because that's a choice they've made in terms of medical conditions, in terms of their child's safety, in terms of their family's safety, and whatever. There are others who chose it, but are open to the idea of coming to in-person. If they say this is not a good product and they go to the in-person, we don't have space for them in the numbers to handle the in-person. We would not be able to accommodate them, and they would put us in complete remote. David?
Okay. So, obviously we're just trying to anticipate questions. One of the questions that pops up as we start, seeing ourselves bursting at the seams in that face-to-face environment, one of the things that pops into people's head is the hybrid model. So we just bulleted out a number of reasons why we steered clear of that to begin with, and they're still relevant right now. I guess I can go through them quickly for everybody. First is with respect to the curriculum. The hybrid model only provides 2 actual days of instruction, as opposed to the enriched virtual, where you're getting actually 5 days of contact with your teacher. That's a huge difference in terms of parents and kids that want a continuous curriculum. Okay. The second thing with the hybrid model that is kind of sneaky is that many students have that required IEP services that are required 5 days a week. So the hybrid model makes that the scheduling of those services very tricky, and it ends up doubling and tripling some of our case managers' time when they have some face-to-face kids, but they also have kids who are on their off day in a hybrid environment that also require their IEP services. The movement to a hybrid scenario would dramatically change the face-to-face and remote numbers. In other words, if we went in that direction, we would have a completely different mix of who was remote, who was face-to-face, and all data we've collected so far would kind of go out the window. So to the right-hand side, in terms of double work, one of the things that people don't realize is, in a hybrid environment, teachers they'll be teaching face-to-face 2 days, right? And then those kids will go remote and they'll inherit 2 other days with a completely new set of kids. It's not feasible to be able to teach the remote kids at the same time you're actually conducting face-to-face class. So a lot of that learning, as I said earlier, becomes asynchronous, and you're not exactly delivering content. You're just more kind of reinforcing the content you could deliver on your 2 days. Obviously, the extraordinary amount of planning time that it would take. And then I'll cap this off with just the idea of durability. In a scenario, even the face-to-face model that we have, also in the hybrid model, there's a lack of durability that I think we're trying to articulate, and it makes all the school administrators nervous in that if we lose a certain number of staff members, whether it be to sniffles, whether it be the flu, or whether it be to something completely different, that creates a scenario where we can't physically run school the way we had set it up. In the enriched virtual learning, those concerns, that durability is, those concerns kind of go away, and that durability is there. We can actually run school. We don't have to quarantine X number of students or X number of teachers in a given time. So that's a quick recap of the hybrid model.
Yeah, and the only other thing I'll say about it, thank you, David, is that we have seen some districts that have solved that double class problem by designating a teacher or designating a team as the people who provide the asynchronous. There's a similar model to that going on in Hampton. But again, you need to have that person or those people to do that. Otherwise, you are creating a situation for teachers where they have both in-person groups and they have an asynchronous group, and students are still only getting 2 days a week where they're actually interacting with the teachers, which is why we didn't go there to begin with. I will say one other word. Even if you were to say to us that, well, that solves your problem with room size, et cetera, we can't set that up in a week. I know districts that have gone hybrid that have been working on it most of the summer. We would simply not be able to move to that kind of a situation in a week. There are also special education issues associated with what we're trying to do that go beyond the issues we've already discussed. Dr. Killian, would you like to talk them through this slide?
I'm happy to. So
Thanks.
where we stand here with special education, it's another layer of services and supports and staffing for a good number of our students. So this pertains to our educational associates, related services such as speech and language pathologists and counselors. So what directors and principals are doing right now is they're looking at their lists, looking at who is in building, who has made requests for to be out of the building, and determining who can support students. And it's not just a matter of supporting students who are in buildings and out of buildings, but it's also providing services in small groups for all students with IEPs. So there was an executive order a couple weeks ago that requires districts to provide in-person services to the maximum extent possible. And we were aiming to do this regardless. We know that students benefit from face-to-face services as much as we can, and we know more now than we did in the spring where everything was shut down. We know how to keep kids safe if we have the staff and facilities and PPE and everything. So and that executive order really pushes that forward. So even in all of these models, whether it's in building, RLA, or enriched virtual learning, those students are coming in. So even when you're thinking of, Seabrook Middle, or even Winnicott High School, these buildings won't be empty. They'll have kids coming in small group, and that requires a lot of coordination as far as transportation with distancing, sometimes one-to-one staff, and so on. So you can see here I put up some of the limitations, some of the issues that are coming up for our schools and our districts. And as Dr. Hobbs and Dr. Lupini mentioned, very interconnected. So where we may have a need in one building for one-to-one that who is asked to be home, or there are small groups in one building, that building may be full. So we're looking for other spaces. So it does vary by district what the issues are, but they're very interconnected, and we're still working out how to staff the small groups and in buildings and remotely, and everybody has full schedules. So that's where it stands right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So the variability is another issue. We can, as I think you've probably seen tonight, we would like to explain some more in terms of staffing, but we're going to ask for a non-public in terms of walking you through some of the more specific staffing issues that we've had, which I'm not at liberty to discuss publicly. But we continue to make adjustments and try to add resources and process request changes. And we've given you a number of examples here. And here's what I think we probably find to be the most frustrating. What we know is what we're talking about to you tonight will change tomorrow morning. We know there will be other complexities or added layers of these same complexities. And you know what? Some of that is normal to working in these jobs. I've done this for 25 years. There's always issues at the beginning of a school year. But when you filter them through a new set of rules, in terms of the number of kids that you can actually put in a classroom, in terms of what you need to do with a remote learning academy and trying to run essentially another school across your school districts, it just adds a level of complexity that's just proven to be very, very difficult. I think this third bullet is really important for everyone to understand, and I think you probably do from the last presentation. When we were together in early August, the identification of COVID symptoms at any given building could be a significant disruption in staffing, scheduling, and provision of services and our ability to stay open. This is not the case in the enriched virtual academy. We've seen it already as we've begun to implement the app for staff as they've come back. We've seen some minor issues, but certainly not anything compared to what we know we'll see when school starts. And
we have a question.
Okay.
We have a question from Jessica.
Okay.
You guys
Jessica, we're having a hard time hearing you. Jessica, we're having a very difficult time hearing you. You're all broken up.
Question, revising other space so that we could have larger, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Which was larger spaces. Have we looked at larger, was your question, have we looked at larger spaces in terms of expanding that number of kids?
Yes.
Yes, and the answer is yes. In fact, at your school, there's a particular grade level where we looked at doing that. There were some reasons why they decided not to. It wasn't going to get them more than a student or so. But yes, we've paid attention to that in all schools, There are some schools, Lincoln Ackerman, I'm thinking of the use of the music room, which is a larger space and allows for some of that. I know Susan's done that at Northampton with respect to some rooms, and in fact using other rooms as breakout rooms, which can expand on that number. And I know Stephanie has done some of that as well at the elementary school. Much more difficult to do, although I know Michelle's looked at it at Southampton as well. So yes, we're trying to look at spaces that may be a little bit larger that give us more capacity. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. And yeah, and so then there's money and budget and those kinds of things in order to pull this off. And I know that that's frustrating for us. I mean, we have, I want to be honest here, and as much as I can talk about this in a public session, we have situations where we cannot accommodate certain people. We cannot meet the accommodations. And so those people are going to, we're going to tell them, or we are telling them, we can't meet certain reasonable accommodations for them. And so they have certain options available at the same time that we're telling you, we need 3 teachers in order to do the remote learning academy. Again, I think from the beginning, what we tried to say is this has to match up perfectly. And maybe I should have anticipated that a little bit more, that it wasn't going to, but it hasn't. And so I think before we go any further in this, Jim, I would ask if we can do a non-public so that we can.
Yeah, before we do that, I think Kelly Huber has a question.
I'm sorry, I can't see. Thank you.
Yeah, I got it up.
So I just have 2 quick questions, and one may be totally unacceptable. So if you can't answer it, that's fine. So when teachers are able to take the leave because they qualify, isn't the school district, I'm only asking this, isn't the school district able to file those funds with the government to be reimbursed? Because my question for that is if that's the case, then wouldn't we have extra funds to be able to hire extra teachers? I'm only asking.
That's a good question. Matt, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I think it's a tax credit that most employers receive that you're referring to as far as reimbursement from the federal government. So we're tax exempt, so that doesn't benefit us. But that's actually, it's less about the money and more about the ability to ascertain, to find those teachers to replace the teachers that we would lose. There isn't necessarily a pool of teachers available right now during a pandemic to replace our current teachers.
Okay, and then my other question was, so if we don't have enough staff for in-person and we don't have enough staff for the remote learning academy, where does that leave us?
So it leaves us right now 3 staff short on the remote learning academy. 3 staff short, although we've been looking because we've been trying to fill that. And it leaves us over in a number of places where I'm not sure you would necessarily do staffing to replace it, or even that you could do staffing to replace it in certain grade levels. So, for example, there's a grade level at Hampton Falls, at Southampton that I know is over that number. There's at least a grade level at Seabrook Elementary. I believe we're close or over on at least a grade level at Northampton, maybe 2, and right up against numbers at Hampton Falls. So it would be harder to sort of pinpoint how we would solve that with staffing than it is the remote learning academy, where I can say to you, we are clearly 3 people short.
So
yeah, I guess the way I've been thinking about this is by following the CDC guidelines on social distancing, it effectively lowers the student to teacher ratio, or basically need more teachers, right? Based on compared to what we've set the budgets on. I mean, that's the fundamental problem.
It absolutely lowers the student to teacher ratio. And again, from the beginning, our goal was to try to accomplish that, at least in part, with the Remote Learning Academy.
Yeah, and then we just the way the numbers shook out, it's just not working out.
That's correct.
Jason, I saw Jason had he raised his hand for a question.
Yeah, Bill, I just, and Matt, and Dave, I was just wondering, how is the process by which you're recruiting teachers for the Remote Learning Academy? How is that occurring?
So we are looking, and please, David, fill in here wherever you want, because I won't capture them all. We're looking at our EA population. So when Tom asked earlier about, are we really exhausting those lists? We're looking at our EA population, particularly, well, first of all, those who are certified and those who perhaps have asked for some sort of accommodation. So they might fit, right? So we've looked there. We've looked at our substitute teacher roster. We've looked at recent searches that we've done for other candidates. We've looked at other searches that some of our neighboring districts have recently done for individuals. So those are the 4 that come right to mind because we've tapped all of them this week. And David?
Jason, we've looked at our specialist population with the credentials, and I've gotten to the point of cold calling people as well.
Yeah, so I just want to, I mean, are you pitching it like it's RLA or in classroom, or is it hey, if you want to teach, you're in classroom, but hey, to maybe some of the younger teachers without families, or I'm just making that up, but would you be willing to teach an online section of this course for an extra stipend, and work something that out, where you distribute the load to the professional staff?
Well, they're elementary, so that's harder to do than it would be at middle or high, right? Because they're elementary teachers, we are in a position. David sort of mentioned this in an earlier slide. We're in a position where we actually have some openings for in-person in some of the districts as well, because we've had some resignations here in the last week. So yes, it's a little bit of both.
Thank you.
So can I just add a quick thing on Kelly's question before we break? Is that okay?
Sure.
And I use the word durability. Bill said it very politely in his own way. But I think the thing that worries me about, Kelly's question about not having enough in person and not having enough with the Remote Learning Academy is we can have 3 teachers and make the Remote Learning Academy work. But we're in a very, very precarious position as we begin the school year if we go in that direction. And furthermore, we're committed financially to it. And I think that deserves to be said out loud because just one change in a world of changes and it goes sideways.
Yeah, before we go, let me just say one other thing too. Leslie, I saw your question because I paused for a moment and looked in the chat, and certainly that's the way the board opted to go on this the last time, was to look at this as individual boards. And this, listen, these 5 boards may choose, actually it's 4. The high school isn't impacted by this, and the boards may choose to do that tonight. I will tell you that I think that's a mistake, because these school districts hang together on this decision, or they hang separately, because this is so interconnected. If some of you said, yeah, we believe we should move toward the recommendation that you have, which it has to do with more remote, it has to do with a remote model, and others of you didn't, you can't run the Remote Learning Academy on your own from Northampton. You simply can't do it. You can't do it at Hampton Falls. You can't do it at Seabrook. You are tied together on this set of decisions in a way that I guess it would be a decision to split and say, well, we would do this and we wouldn't. That's a decision that would throw the whole thing into not being possible to do.
So, Bill, I know you haven't made your recommendation yet, but it seems like you're leaning towards the recommendation of more remote. And would the RLA be moot because anyways.
Yeah, in a model where we go completely the enhanced virtual learning that we're doing at the high school, that we're doing at Seabrook Middle, we don't need the Remote Learning Academy. That's correct.
Okay.
Although, I think the problem, as I've thought through that, as of right now, I believe based on the way the state's outlined it, is we do have to provide a remote learning option. So you have a weird scenario, and like there's no end date to when that comes out. Like we just don't have a firm timeline as to when each school doesn't have to provide that option to the students. So I agree with Bill here. All the school districts are tied together, because you can't put that option together, or you're never going to be able to come out of remote until there's a statewide, decision that everybody has to go back into school.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're going to have a statewide decision, right? So
yeah, it's like, I just don't know how you plan it.
Yeah. So listen, I don't want to quibble. I'll wait till I hear the recommendation. But if the recommendation is to go remote, then it is a moot point. Jim, I do have one question for you. I've got a series of questions based upon the presentation. I don't know what the process is this evening, so I know we're looking to go into non-public, which I'm happy to do, and I can hold my questions. I just want to make sure that there's a chance for dialogue before the end of the evening.
Yeah, I would say let's go into the non-public side of it, just to go through that, and then we can come out and then answer any other questions that that people have.
I'd like to make a motion to move to non-public under, let me see what the...
I'm going to stop sharing so I can actually see what's going on. Yeah, good.
I have to view the agenda, sorry. I'd like to make a motion to move into non-public under RSA 91A32C.
I'll second that.
Rhonda, you want to do the roll call vote?
Greg Parrish,
Yay.
Greg Duffy,
Yes.
Jennifer Hubbard,
Yes.
Sharon Gordon,
Yes.
Leslie LaFond,
Yes.
Jason Farias,
Yes.
Nermina Peterson,
Yes.
Forrest Carter,
Yes.
Mike Rabideau,
Yes.
Heidi Terracina,
Yes.
Tony Delano,
Yes.
Jill Swayze,
Yes.
Tom Von Jess,
Yes.
Kelly Huber,
Yes.
Jim Keim,
Yes.
Henry Marsh,
Yes.
Rebecca Burdick,
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Jessica Brown,
Yes.
Aaron Stanton,
Yes.
and John Bailey.
Yes.
I have the roll call taken.
You want to explain to them, David, what we're doing? Although I think most
Sure.
people know.
So for the attendees in this meeting, the people watching, Rhonda will keep this meeting open. We will all disappear. We're going to go to a separate meeting in non-public, and then we will return to this meeting as soon as we're done. For the board members that are here, you have invitation via Zoom in your inbox to a different meeting called non-public. See you there.
I have went ahead and started recording. But we're still bringing all the board members back into the room. I think the only person, I don't see Becky Burdick at the moment.
Becky said she's not going to be able to finish this.
Okay. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out if we have everybody. I feel like we lost some people. So I'm just going to real quick, just to make sure we have everybody back in, I'm going to call the people who were in here earlier. If you guys could just speak up and make sure that you're back and that we're not missing anybody. I had Greg Parrish, and I see Greg here. Jason Farias is here. Jill Swayze, is she back with us? Oh, there's Jill.
Yes.
Yep, I'm here.
John Bailey. I see him. Aaron Stanton. I see Greg Duffy. There's Greg. Nermina.
Yep.
Okay. Tom Von Jess.
Present.
Okay. Forrest Carter. I see Jennifer Hubbard is here. Jessica Brown and Kelly Huber, Mike Rabideau, and Jim Kime. So we, oh, wait a minute. Sharon Gordon. I'm not done. Sharon. Heidi Terracina.
Here.
Okay. Henry Marsh. We are waiting on Henry. I have Leslie and Tony.
Yep.
So it looks like we're just waiting on Henry to get back in here.
Okay, can we do the vote to come out of non-public while we wait on Henry?
Yes.
I make a motion that we come out of non-public.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Okay, I have Leslie LaFond, and the person that seconded that was who?
Greg Parrish.
Greg Parrish. Thanks, Greg. I will take the roll call vote. Greg Parrish.
Present, family in and out of the room.
John Bailey.
Present, family and out of the room.
Jessica Brown.
Present, family in and out.
Rebecca Burdick is not present. Sharon Gordon.
Present. Alone.
Leslie LaFond.
President, they're still in the basement, and Henry just said he can see the meeting, but he's not in.
Let me see.
He's on an attendee. Yeah.
Do you want to grab him, Greg? Or I'm sorry, Dave?
I'm no longer a co-host. He's H. Marsh.
Okay. You know what? I'm going to make you a co-host while I continue to do the roll call. Greg Duffy.
Here, alone.
Jason Farias.
Here, folks in and out of the room.
Okay. Rebecca, I'm sorry, Jim Kime.
I'm here and by myself.
Kelly Huber.
Yes.
Forrest Carter.
Present and alone.
Tony Delano. Is Tony Delano back with us? Tony.
On mute.
Okay.
He looks frozen and
Frozen.
Yeah. Tony, I'm going to mark you as present. I see you, but you look like you froze up. Nermina Peterson.
Present, alone.
Henry Marsh.
Present, alone.
Mike Rabideau,
Present alone.
Heidi Terracina,
Present alone.
Aaron Stanton.
Here, family in and out.
That was Aaron Stanton.
Hey, present, family, in and out.
And Jill Swayze.
Here alone.
Great, thank you.
And Jennifer Hubbard is here. Okay. I have the roll call taken.
I'm
Thank
here,
you.
sorry.
So we definitely have some work, I think Q&A from the board members or questions from the board members. I guess my one question, Bill, is do you want to give the recommendation before that
Why don't I
Q&A?
show you? Yeah, I have 2 slides to show you, and one includes that, and then, yeah, then we can just.
And then we'll go from there. I think that's probably the right
Absolutely.
process.
Great, thank you. So, and that'll mean I'll have to do this, which I unfortunately have gotten pretty good at. Yeah, so I want to go back to this slide for a minute because it really, I think it acts as a good summary. It wasn't meant as one, but I think it does. So the complications of our plan that we've realized over this time, and again, I'm sorry that we're here tonight having this conversation, where the viability of the in-person models at Southampton, Seabrook Elementary, Hampton Falls, and Northampton, which fall into a number of categories: the significant number and complexity of accommodation requests, which we've talked about, the providing adequate social distancing in classrooms and scheduling given student number limitations, remote staffing costs and the identification of candidates to teach in that remote academy, the designation and provision of supports for students that are learning in 4 different models, which Dr. Eric Killian talked about. And I think the one that's bolded on this other side is really something that we just continue to emphasize for you, and that is the interconnectedness of individual districts within the SAU, and as someone said earlier, even outside of the SAU. In other words, what we do, we really have to do together, because the model falls apart when we do different things. And now, if I can do this, I'm going to stop that for a moment. I'm going to go, well, yeah, I don't need to narrate what I'm doing, right? You don't need me to do that. Oh, great, I just clicked out of it. Ah, there it is. So let me get out of that and go back to this. Give me 1 second. Yeah. So this and this again. Honest, I really do know what I'm doing. And so all of those pieces have led us under the 4 tenets of where we started this whole conversation to a recommendation to move for the beginning of the year to an enriched virtual learning environment across our schools. The safety piece, because of the environment that provides in terms of student safety, the equity piece, because it doesn't have us looking to try to solve problems for our other districts with one district, the wellness issues, and teaching and learning, where we know, because of what we've laid out now at the high school and the middle level students at Northampton and Seabrook Middle School, where we know we can provide live sessions for students every day on a schedule. We know we can replicate that at our other schools as well. This is not where we want to be. It's not where we want to end up. But given the issues that we've laid out for you, it is where we believe we need to be for the beginning of the year, and to work toward, as we've promised at other places, the more and more in-person kinds of small group situations that we can increase over time, and have more kids come into the building over time, and work toward much more of an in-person experience over the course of the year. You know, I've been asked by parent after parent, including one today, if the virus numbers are here, why is this where we are? It doesn't seem to have anything to do with the virus. And in terms of those positivity rates, those testing rates, I would agree. But in terms of the other pieces that have been impacted by the virus, by the very presence of the virus, it has significant impact. It's had impact on our employees. It's had impact on parents and at least 160 of them, their willingness to send their kids to school and looking for that remote experience. It has to do with the districts around us, which has impacted our employees and their ability to come to work 5 days a week versus exercise their rights under one of the federal provisions. It has had tremendous impact on our ability to get back to bringing students in 5 days a week. It's impacted us in terms of the number of students we can put in a classroom and social distance appropriate, all those kinds of things. So is it about virus rates, testing positive rates? Absolutely not. Is it about all of the other impacts that the virus has had on our daily lives? Yes. So I'm sorry to bring you this recommendation tonight. We worked up till the 11th hour to try to find ways to make the things that we've talked about here tonight work in our districts so that we didn't have to have this conversation, and we were not successful. And so here we are. And we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I think Greg Parrish, did you have a question that you want to ask?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I have several, but I'll start here. I want to know what the psychological impact of these kids are going to be by not getting back to school. Even if we can get them in school for 2 weeks, to get them in front of their teachers, for their friends, their classmates, these kids are hurting. And it's going to come out here once we get into our so-called school year. So, I hear about being able to help them, but I don't see that happening in a remote environment. And for me, getting them in school for 2 weeks, I think would be huge moving forward. And I'm really struggling with this and why we can't do it. Even though I understand some of the parameters here and the interconnectedness, it's frustrating me. And I guess I'm looking for some answers.
So I'm not the person to speak to the specifics of that impact, although I know that kids need school, they need an in-person experience, they need to be with other kids, and they need to be with their teachers, right? Which is why in the remote model that we've proposed and are in the process of implementing at the high school and at Seabrook Middle and in the middle grades at Northampton, we've tried to emphasize bringing in groups of students to meet with their teachers, whether it's at the beginning of the year in terms of orientation experiences, or whether as we go throughout the year in terms of small group kinds of experiences of a variety of different ways. If you're asking me to compare the benefit of bringing kids in for 2 weeks versus what we're proposing, I'm not going to argue that what you've suggested is a better model. I'm suggesting to you that I don't know that I can deliver what you've asked for.
I get that, Bill. I'm not asking for that comparison. It just seems to be getting lost here, and it's.
I don't think it's lost at all, Greg. I think we listen. Everybody on this team, if we didn't say it often enough, if we had our way, kids would be in school every day of, I can't even believe I'm sitting here saying kids would be in school every day for 180 days, and we would have extracurricular activities and all the kinds of things that we normally associate with schooling. But what we've tried to do tonight is to present a number of the different impediments to that and what we believe we can do, which is the best that we can offer in terms of making sure that we take care of kids academically and that we take care of kids socially and emotionally, and that we take care of at least some of those needs to get kids together within the limitations that we're given. And if we've failed to make the case for that, then I'm sorry. We can try again, but we have certain limitations that when you compare what we've proposed to for example, bringing them in the model you suggested. I just want to make sure we're all clear. I might be in a position on day one, on September 8th, when I have to say this fifth grade, this third grade, this second grade isn't coming back tomorrow because we can't meet the particular social distancing guidelines that we need to live by in order to make sure everyone is safe. And I don't want to be in that position either. And I know you don't want me to be in that position.
No. Thank you.
Tom, did you have questions?
Yeah, so comment and question as I'm getting my head all the way around this. So first of all, I just want to publicly say thank you for the hard work. I understand it's complicated. You did a great job tonight of explaining the background, the process, and the timeline, getting legal opinion. And yet this is a big curveball to a lot of folks out in the community. I certainly understand the issues with ADA, FMLA, FFCRA, and taking care of our responsibilities to all of our employees. The requirement to provide a remote option, I think, is a big curveball here, because as you start to have some accommodations and needing to have the right ratios with kids, kind of blows everything up from a staffing and ratio perspective. I think it's really important that at some point in aggregate, and not at a grade level, but at a school level, to be able to say to our community, hey community, here's the real problem. You know, we needed X number of teachers, we only had Y, and this is the reason that we need to be remote. And what the time frame looks like to come through this. I mean, is this a trimester issue? Is this a 12/31? We think we'll be back. I know we're talking about moving back in slowly by having small learning groups, but what are the triggers to bring us back?
Yeah.
Family plan, right? I mean,
yeah. So thanks for that. So at the beginning of the week, we had actually developed a metric of indicators that we would continue to look at, that we would report on to the public around different indicators of moving back toward more in person. It would be, were we able to bring in those small groups? Were we able to see some movement in terms of us being able to have more staff members in the building to teach? So I don't have it in front of me tonight because it's in draft. And quite frankly, this week got away from us to the point where it was supposed to be done right now. Some parents probably here tonight say you promised that by Friday or Monday, and I did, and we just haven't been able to finish it in the work of everything we ended up talking about tonight. But we intend to publish that and to report on it. I think we talked about in those other earlier discussions, and every sort of 2 week, I think there's a period of time when that starts. Some of the other districts have said their goal is to start looking at those indicators by October 15th. I quite frankly think ours is around October 1st, but I intend to put out those indicators to report to the public on how we're doing against them in terms of bringing kids in, separate from anything else that we may see. Well, no, actually, it does include virus transmission rates and those kinds of things as well in there, but also some of the other things that I just mentioned in terms of increasing the availability of staff, the ability to bring in more and more smaller groups at all of our schools, and actually reporting on that.
One last question, if I may, Jim. If we as a board declined your recommendation and voted no, what would happen? Because I think we just need to have that conversation. Because
it's a fair question. Let me try to answer it. If you did that, and you're certainly that's your prerogative, then we would have to continue to try to staff the remote learning academy over the next few days. And we would have to come back to you with where we recommend the money come from in your individual school district budgets in order to pay for it. So that's one. A second one revolves around those numbers. I would have to continue to work with principals around the numbers of kids versus the classroom capacity, given social distancing parameters, et cetera. And we could be, and we continue to work at that, and that may result in other kinds of staffing. It probably wouldn't, because I think it's more a room issue than it is a staff issue, although now that I think about it, it's probably a combination of both. And we could face the possibility that on September 8th, because we know in some of your districts more than others, new enrollees show up on those days, and we may not be able to take them in to a classroom. And if they didn't choose a remote learning academy situation, I might be in a situation on September 8th where I might be making some decisions about particular grade levels and whether they were going to continue to meet in person. We could possibly, off of the pieces that Dr. Arakelian reported to you, we could be short in terms of EA support, which means we'd be in violation of some IEPs, and we could be facing the ramifications of that. Or we could have some EAs taking the leave that they're entitled to under the law, and we could hire their replacements if we could find them, and therefore we'd be talking to you about the budgetary implications of that. Those are the three major areas that would come to mind. What I won't do is I won't place these districts in a position where you are violating the parameters that Primex, your insurer, has given us in terms of appropriate social distancing, in terms of appropriate accommodations around the things that we've identified in our plan. And living those accommodations, because that would place the districts at risk of liability should something go wrong. And I'm bound by law not to do that. So I wouldn't. I would take steps to make sure those things did not occur. Does that answer your question, at least in part, Tom?
It does. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Bill, under this plan, what I don't see is the next steps, I guess. When can we start trying to have conversations about getting these kids back into school? I know that's a little premature because we're not even there yet, but when could those conversations begin?
Well, I would say we have them, whether it's about the since I know we have them every day, whether it's about the high school or the middle schools that have already gone to the remote. But I would say, Greg, at this point, we'd have them on some level while we're planning to get open, whatever open means now under this. But I would say, as even in the lead up to September 8th, and certainly immediately thereafter, I think that matrix that we've done some work on gives you part of your answer, because it says as we're able, because our goal is to get more and more small groups in, right? And so that's the goal up front, is to try to move toward that quickly, whether it's in orientation programs or in small groups for science experiments or art classes or music classes or whatever it may be, and work toward increasing those. But given that that would be our goal, to do that and do it safely, and has been from the time we started this planning, I'd say we'd start those conversations even as we were working with the principals, who would now have a very short timeline to implement this new plan in getting themselves open. I would say those conversations would begin immediately.
Okay. Going back to a conversation this joint board had at the end of the last year's school year, there was a lot of concern about quality. David certainly has expressed to us that he heard us, that we're expecting to see quality lessons, education, some benchmarks for the teachers, hopefully through this remote process, and I appreciate that. But I certainly hope they meet these standards. I know these aren't ideal times for anybody, but the remote learning has to be quality. These lessons have to be top notch. These teachers have to help these students get caught up the best they can. It's more of a comment than a request, but it's just how I feel.
Yeah, and I think we share that expectation, Greg, whether it's at the schools where we've already started this work, but that's certainly our expectation in terms of the schedule. I think if you look at any of those presentations, whether it's the high school or some of the others that have already been done in terms of schedules that have been created, in terms of the live instruction that'll happen, in terms of support from those teachers and other support people, counselors, et cetera. You know, I think the plan's there. I think what you comment on that is very, very important to us in terms of monitoring is the execution of that plan. And that's something we've emphasized to those principals, that it has to be there. The evaluation component in terms of those principles has to be there. And we're focused on ensuring that does happen.
So Bill, quick question. As sort of you outlined early in your presentation, we're essentially short 3 teaching positions to make the remote model work, correct?
The 3 teaching positions and almost $300,000, yes.
Yeah. Let's find the money.
So it is a lot of money. That's an option that is on the table still, though.
Well, that's one piece. Right, and we could solve that and still have the problem with group size on September 8th at some schools. And some, I know right now, I'm sitting here knowing that I have some classrooms that are over as I sit here.
So Bill, I know in the last meeting we discussed having, revisiting this every 2 weeks. So I guess my question is when that was mentioned, with all due respect, how do we visit it every 2 weeks when the issue consists of being the same for the next 12 weeks? Because if there's a leave of absence taken by an educator, it would be most likely for a 12-week period. So how do we revisit something every 2 weeks that is going to stay the same?
No, it's a fair and a good question. So we've laid out in terms of that draft document a series of sort of things to look at. But you're right. One of those things is around educator availability. I didn't call it exactly that in the document, but it is around that. And you know, some people, the circumstances will change. People want to come back and work. So some of them will change in terms of their availability as they're able to access other kinds of supports that may be in place in where they live or in their family or whatever. But the main part of it is really a focus on trying to make sure we're getting kids in whatever amount of time it's going to be, whether it's that month of September till we start sort of looking at this every 2 weeks on October 1st. It's really trying to increase the number of kids that we have in and the number of small groups that we have in. That's one indicator, another indicator as well. But it may be, and we really haven't focused on this, maybe we should have, it may be around providing other kinds of accommodations over time. We had spoken at one time about people bringing their children to schools as that's played to our schools, as that's played out, that would have actually caused other problems because every action has a reaction in this. But I know some other districts that have started to look at partnerships with the Y or other kinds of organizations to provide those kinds of accommodations for their employees' children on the days when they don't have. So there are a number of those kinds of things that we can do, Kelly, that could reduce those numbers to a point, because it's not necessary to have everybody, right, to come back in person with some model, but it is necessary to reduce it somewhat. And we may be able to, through some of those combinations, be able to reduce it enough to bring back some of those models. And the other thing is to continue to try to work with the Southeasters around what we're all doing and communicating to one another about our models and what we're doing within those models in order to allow, because everybody's having these problems, right? this move by us tonight will cause some districts some problem. If you take this action, it will cause some other district, a superintendent, to call me tomorrow and say, thanks a lot. Because we all have an impact on someone even this close to the beginning of the school year. So that's the best answer I can give you is it's really focused on trying to bring kids in more often for small groups, to make sure teachers are in our buildings to be able to do that, and to be able to find strategies that increase teachers' availability.
Bill, there's a question in chat from Jill.
And I have a second question also, if you'll indulge me. The first one was just about what indicators that will help us know when it's time, when we can bring students back. And I'll ask the second one and then let you respond. And the second question is, if we go in this direction, that leaves the schools and the principals with essentially a week of planning time, can we consider pushing out the start date again and maybe buying them a little bit more time so they could be more prepared to start appropriately?
The answer is that we could. I'd want to get with them probably tomorrow and see what we're actually looking at as to whether we needed to do that. So I'd rely on them for that, and I would meet with them. Well, I'm out first thing in the morning, but I would meet with them as soon as I'm in to do that. And the other question is sort of, I probably did a very poor job, is really what I mentioned earlier, that we've been working on a matrix of those indicators, and they include things like where we are with the virus itself, which again is not been a terribly large part of our conversation, but what kinds of things we've been able to do to increase staff availability, what kinds of things we've been able to do in terms of bringing small groups and increased numbers of those small groups of students in, those kinds of measures. And again, I wish I would have been in a position to share that matrix even in its draft form, but didn't get to it this week for all of these other reasons that we've ended up talking about tonight. But we'll probably by early next week.
Bill, I guess I have trouble reconciling the indicators. If we go remote, like, it's as good as it's going to get right now. It can only get worse. So if we don't send our kids back now at the best opportunity, they're not going back to school all year. And there's no indicators other than a cure that will get everyone back in school, that will get everyone off FMLA. So that doesn't seem to be likely in the course of time, and as history has shown, years are a little bit trickier. It's not going to get better. And so I don't understand what kind of indicators are going to, in a month or two from now, unless there's a cure for this, I don't understand what can change and say, okay, it's safe to bring our kids back now. When right now in this moment, we're as good as we have a low incident rates. Everyone's in a good, healthy spot. And
I agree with Greg.
Okay, and I don't disagree with Greg. What I've tried to say here is that virus, again, as I said, parents have written to me and said the virus rate is this. Why aren't we doing this? Well, because it's not about that virus rate. It's about all the associated pieces that have come with the virus, right? So one example.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Those associated pieces are because of the virus.
Yes.
So they're related.
Yes. Yes, they're associated with the virus. So where I might disagree with you is, RCA expires on, expires on December 31st. So
Right,
we have a number of those pieces that are clearly in place in the district without talking about individuals. And I'm not going to do that. You're not asking me to, but we have a number of those. People are going to have, if that's not extended, people are going to have decisions to make then, because we're going to expect that people return to work full time.
But Bill, I think, I may be wrong, but I think what Greg's saying is that everybody at this point is as healthy as they're going to get. Next, we're going to have the flu season come into place. Flu season, we all know, has the same symptoms as COVID. So then if we don't go back now and the flu season comes aboard, it's going to be very hard to determine if we have the flu or we have COVID. So then we're just finished, or then we're going to be out till December. Then December comes rolling back around, and I agree with them. If we don't go back now, I would be shocked if we go back this year. And I'm trying to be positive when I say that, because I don't want to see that happen.
So without getting into the flu season, because I've actually listened to some things that seem to indicate we won't have a flu season or as much of a flu season, but I'm not a medical expert, so I'm not going to go there. But it is true, and I think we laid that out in this presentation, that another part of this entire discussion has to do with the protocols the nurses have been given, the kinds of things that we know we're looking at that will cause absence. I think early on in a presentation to this board, I said to you, one of the major complications we're going to have is that the incentives that we have in place for employees and students, but let's stick with employees for a minute, run counter to what we're now asking them to do, right? We're asking them to stay home when they are sick, when many of the incentives, not just in our business, but many businesses, don't incent that. They incent behavior that's different. So we've had many interesting conversations over the last month about that with the union, with individual employees, about the counter narrative of an incentive model that doesn't incent people to do what we're now asking them to do. And so there's no question that those pieces are already present in the system and could bubble up on day one. Listen, I'm not going to argue that if we have a normal flu season, that's going to make all of this more complicated, and that we're probably not coming back during that normal flu season. I'm not about to sit here and argue the other side of that. I'm telling you the situation, and I understand where you're coming from. I'm telling you the situation that is in front of you as board members today. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to do that as honestly and straightforward as I can and make a recommendation based on those facts. As Tom asked me, if we don't do that, what will happen? I've tried to lay out to you the actions that I will need to take, right, over the next 2 weeks, and I will do them. I will identify with the business manager monies in your budgets and ask you to allocate them to the Remote Learning Academy. I will step in on September 8th and shut down classrooms or find other strategies where we go over those numbers. I will make recommendations to hire EAs to make sure that you're not found in violation of special education laws. We will do all that. We came to you tonight to say, these are problem areas that we're not sure we can overcome in total. And so based on that, this is the best recommendation that we can make, even though all of us despise the recommendation. We want kids to come back to school.
I think I just struggle with, giving out like a false sense of hope of kids even getting taken into school in small groups when like the last board member just said, we're really in a good place right now. And I really don't see things getting better as like the cold and flu season comes, because every little sniffle, somebody's going to think it's, COVID, or you got to take those precautions. And I just struggle with the fact that, we're hoping for something that I don't see happening when the numbers are really good right now and we can't even go back now.
So people asked me, the question was that I tried to answer was, what's the road back? And so I'm not trying to give anybody any false sense of hope. I was asked the question, what's the road back? The road back is increasing staff member availability, increasing the number of students that we can bring in small groups over time, starting right at the beginning of the year. That's the road back. I would love to say to you that we're going to keep doing that to work toward bringing students back, and that is our goal. Do I believe that can happen given all the complications that you've laid out here tonight and all I know from our nurses and have heard in those discussions? I think that's going to be very complicated. But I don't see it as an either or. So no one is saying this, but I want to make sure we're not saying this. Bringing kids back at the beginning of the year, which alleviates your concern, if they could come back for 2 weeks, would that be great? Yes. That doesn't get rid of my problems that we've laid in front of you tonight. This is not an either or. Both sets of things exist. Right? And in fact, that's why we recommended the models that we recommended to you in Seabrook, in Southampton, in Hampton Falls, and in Northampton. That's why we recommended the models in the beginning, because we agree with you. Our goal was to get kids into school, even if it was only for some period of time. What I'm presenting to you, what this team's presenting to you tonight, are the complicating factors in that.
Bill, if you had the money to hire the 3 additional teachers, I apologize. What's the likelihood of you being able to hire somebody between now and the school year, number one, and number two, would those positions be placed at the SAU or at a particular, or spread across one of the 4 particular districts?
Oh boy. Matt, I believe we talked about we wouldn't do them at the SAU. There are other complications around the SAU that we've overcome with a position or 2, but I believe we'd put them in individual districts and do the transfers the way you talked about earlier. Is that right?
Right. So each district would be allocated a certain or be responsible for a certain amount, which was represented in that one slide that broke out the cost. So yeah, it would be different by school based on number of students enrolled in Remote Learning Academy, and then also by the number of existing teachers, factoring in the number of existing teaching staff that would be associated with that school.
So District A could have to hire a new teacher, but they wouldn't fund that position fully necessarily. There'd be funds transferred from another district to cover part of that cost.
So each district would have a responsibility. So it wouldn't fall on one district.
Okay, thank you.
And Tom, I think they were having difficulty in identifying
Yes,
teachers. That was the other part of your question. So there was a meeting with the heads of the various school boards a couple of days ago where we went over this, and we really did push the administration to try to find a solution. And but there's real difficulty there.
Yeah, so one of the things I wonder is if it's truly remote, because these are 3 teachers for the Remote Learning Academy, do they need to live in New Hampshire, right? Because they're going to be remote teachers. Are there teachers that could be licensed in New Hampshire, but live in another state?
Oh, sure.
That opens up the
universe.
Yeah, we did ask that question, Tom, as well. Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Bill and Tom, thank you for bringing that up. Bill, I got a question. You know, with us just seeing this and the principals really digesting it, 24 hours ago, does it make sense to think about postponing this vote so that we could, you know, day 2, Monday, in second? I'm wondering if there's if we could explore the possibility of a cost share between the districts, not based on enrollment percentages, but just availability of funds, such that we could make this happen. And not just say, you know, but entertain that idea. Hey, we're at the 11th hour. We can't spread this, you know, is there a possibility of redistributing the allotments and what the district to make this work? Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
So, thanks, Jason. So first question, I would say there are clearly upsides to that in terms of being able to digest the information, come back and ask some additional questions, that kind of thing. And there are clearly downsides to that in terms of being able to actually pull it off in X number of days that now becomes X minus some number of days. So sure, you could do that, but there are those downsides. And I'm worried about September 8th, which drives me more to Jill's question around whether, if we got into next week, whether I would be looking, if I knew this is what we were going to do. And that's the other part. If I don't know whether we're doing this or what we're doing now, do I keep over the next 3 days looking for remote learning academy teachers and continue to judge those numbers and what actions I might have to take on September 8th? It leaves us, whatever it's worth, it leaves us trying to play both sides of a model over the next 2 or 3 days. Right. So that's, I don't love that idea, but.
So am I to understand correctly that even if we hire these 3 remote learning teachers, we could still get to the first day of school?
Looking at.
We could still get to the first day of school and the classrooms be too big,
Because I want to emphasize that point from earlier. I consulted legal counsel. I cannot tell people who are coming in, we're at a cap number on grade 3 at Barnard School. Therefore, we have a seat for you in the remote learning academy. Legal counsel has advised me that I'm not permitted to do that.
Right. So even if we do hire these 3 remote learning teachers, you still, that problem doesn't go away.
That problem and the problems that Dr. Arkelian illustrated with respect to special education, et cetera, do not go away. They are separate problems, if you will.
And then what happens with these?
Let me just answer Jason's other question.
Oh, sorry.
You can allocate funds, I believe, unless Mr. Farrar is going to hit me here. I believe you can allocate funds in a different manner other than based on some kind of student formula, if that's what you as a group choose to do.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the joint board could make that decision to allocate it in a different manner if you wanted to.
And all I'm saying is perhaps just a day or some extra time to discuss that option gives us that freedom. But understood, Bill. You push this out. There are other ancillary issues to worry about. But with such a critical decision,
I understand.
And if that could be solved with with the discussion of, well, basically Matt and the principals, if that could be solved relatively simply, agreeably, doesn't it make sense? Is it worth taking that shot? That's it.
So I just want to point out that the financial piece is just one very small.
Understood.
I mean, so it's really the aggregate of all of these issues outlined that is where our recommendation is coming from. Certainly, the financial piece is important, but it's just one very small piece of the overall issue. So.
Can I make a comment? I know I don't have a horse in the race right now with Winnicott, but I guess one of the things I'm listening to is, hiring these 3 teachers. First off, we're talking about a week before school starts. So what does your teacher pool look like? We've always prided ourselves on quality teachers and whatnot. I know, yes, you're going to find some, but didn't you already say in the beginning, Bill, too, that there aren't the teachers out there that for these positions? Or did I mishear that?
Well, what we've done so far, because it's evolved so quickly, is we've looked at our EAs who are licensed. We've looked at our sub roles. We've looked at other searches that we did, and we've been largely unsuccessful within that in identifying people. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess my opinion would be pushing off the vote. These teachers, these students, these families, they've got to know what's going on, and they need to know now. I think I don't understand why it's such a bad thing. Everybody's coming about saying how, well, we're safe now and everybody's healthy now. So why shouldn't we go back to school? And I'm like, I look at it completely the other way is, yeah, we're healthy and safe now. So let's stick with remote, go for a month, see where we are in the towns and whatnot. And then we can always go the other way. Do you know what I mean? To me, I would love to see us take a vote now and either yes or no it, so that these families and the teachers can make their plans.
Well, I think it's because the students need some type of structure. So the structure of getting them in the school now would at least give them the confidence to know that they can do this when they go home. I mean, right now.
But Kelly, we're talking about small groups can come in. That's what this model says, is that small groups can come in, so you can get your small group coming in to meet a teacher and leaving, so that they have that rapport.
Bill, are we going to be running the buses for all this?
How we're going to get these kids in there? I mean, are we going to have transportation with buses to get these children in there?
So we've worked at other places, Kelly. We've worked at transportation to, and Mr. Farrar's done a great job with the principals who proposed a number of different ideas around how they want to schedule small groups, how they want to run transportation to be able to do that. I mean, it's a bit of a creative exercise, but we've worked at it with those schools that have already gone to this type of model and would do the same at these schools.
So there would be a bus transportation?
We would have transportation available on certain days or more than certain days in terms of bringing in small groups. It's a little bit of a coordination exercise, but yes, there would be.
Can I make one more point too? So we hire these 3 teachers. Okay, say we decide we're going to go hire these 3 teachers. All of a sudden, we have to go fully remote. Have we now wasted all that money on these 3 teachers? Because what are they doing?
Yeah, it's one of the complications, and we didn't get that far into the weeds tonight. Thank you, Leslie. But one of the issues is, how do we hire them? Some people have said, well, you hire them essentially. We had a discussion the other day, and I agreed with it. You hire them for the first trimester. And so that cuts down on the pool of people you might get, right? Because there aren't a lot of people that are going to take a job like that. Or if they get offered a job in another district, something comes along, they're going to be gone. And so that's one way to do it. The other is that you hire them for the year, and then you run into what Leslie just laid out, which is now you own them.
Yeah,
and now you went remote.
But you hire them for the year, and if we went fully remote, we'd have full-time subs that we could utilize across the organization. They could come in and be spectacular teachers. We don't have to assume that they're not.
That's right, Tom. There are lots of
Yeah, absolutely. But you're hiring them for certain. Again, we're going to run into that same thing where you've got an 8th grade teacher teaching 2nd grade or whatnot, and now you're going to put them in subs in other. I don't know that works the best.
Dr. Lupini taught me that these things all seem to work out over time, Leslie. The other thing is,
stop quoting me.
Your point, Leslie, before about remote and kind of getting into it now makes total sense for the high school. It may not make sense for elementary students. I just think we need to look across the entire spectrum. Different needs.
100%. Yep.
Yeah, I think the way I look at it is, I mean, I want our children to go into class and school. I was planning to send my kids to school in person, but I think what the administration is laying out, and I think they've articulated, they share that same goal. They're telling us that they can't actually do it, that they have true problems that they at this point can't kind of overcome. And so they've made a recommendation, which we as a board need to vote on if we're comfortable to do that or not, and start the year with a remote plan. So I do think we've had a lot of conversation and all the points are good. I share the frustration. But I think it is point where we do need to make that vote. and make a decision. So I'd ask for a motion on to accept the recommendation.
Jim, may I ask a quick question?
Sure.
If we wanted to consider pushing the school calendar out a week to allow principals and staff some additional planning time, is that something that we need to take into consideration now with this vote or add it to the motion? Or is that something we do, Bill, is that handled separately?
I'm not, I can only answer it this way. I'd have to think through what that looks like in terms of our collective bargaining agreement, those number of days. In other words, do we stop next Thursday for a week, right? And then bring teachers back? I don't even know if I can do that. I'd have to consult the collective bargaining agreement and see what my obligations are. I have certain obligations after a certain date in terms of changing the calendar. So I believe I owe the union a consultation on that. So I'm not sure that a motion tonight on that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I would think we would handle that under separate vote anyways. That's what we did last time.
Have principals indicated that that's necessary, having that extension?
We have not, they have not, but I haven't specifically asked it either, so.
So the question is there a motion regarding the recommendation?
I have a question. If we make a motion and the motion gets voted down, what's our next option?
Your option is that we don't have another recommendation. We would stick with the existing plan and we would continue to work to implement that.
I make a motion that we accept the plan as stated.
I'll second that.
Can you be more specific? Are you talking about the remote plan?
It's the only one on the table, isn't it? The remote one?
Yeah, there was the recommendation by the superintendent to
All right.
start the year remote.
Yeah.
That's the motion.
Can we do it? It's the David. I get enhanced, enriched, all wrong. So can you state the name of what we're talking about? Because we've talked about some different models of remote here. So
to adopt the plan, the superintendent's recommendation of enriched virtual learning, K through 12 for SAU 21.
Thank you.
Exactly.
So Bill, Greg Parrish, if this does get approved tonight, what would the next steps be for moving forward over the next few days?
Well, so I'll prepare something that would go to all parents. That would go tomorrow. I have an appointment early in the morning, but as soon as I was in the office, probably by 9 or 10, we'd be meeting specifically with these principals sometime in that time frame to start talking through what that entails and what support they need to sort of catch up to the implementation that's already underway at Northampton Middle, Seabrook Middle, and the high school. So those would be my immediate steps.
For those schools that were planning to go back to school, how much of a impact outside the obvious to rearranging their schedules or looking at what they were doing will this cause?
I think it's different for different schools. I mean, I've had conversation with each of those principals. I think it's different for each school. And I think it's different for each school. I mean, we first have to, and the other thing I guess my colleague Dr. Hobbs would be doing tomorrow is untangling the Remote Learning Academy. And HR would be dealing with a now differing set of accommodation requests for some people. So Greg, the real answer to your question is it's different at each school, more complicated at some, given where they were and what their model was. A grade span model will be more difficult to sort of, untangle than some of the other schools that were running something that was more akin to the traditional model that they normally run.
Will there be any impact to the current MOA conversations?
They'll be minimal. There will be some, but that MOA is geared toward leaving open the possibility of face-to-face and small groups. And so those factors that deal with, allowing, encouraging, creating opportunities for small group in person with kids would be there regardless.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Henry, do you have a question?
Yes, just quickly, because that motion, does that affect Winnicott? Because the motion was a broad motion for the SAU?
It does not impact, it's a good question, Henry. It does not impact those schools that were already in the enriched virtual.
Because it wasn't clarified in the motion.
No, it's a good point.
That's why I'm bringing this up.
I think the motion should also include language that clarifies that Seabrook Middle, that Northampton grades 6 to 8, and that Winnicott High School were already in that particular mode.
One other quick thing is that Winnicott has been initially having kids in small groups as part of the social emotional and so forth. That might be something that the schools look into as well.
Yes, that would be, and it has been, we talked about it earlier for the middle schools, and that would be part of the planning that principals would need to get in place for this at their schools as well.
Bill, are we able to take call? Are we doing public comment so that we can hear some of what the parents and?
We do not have a public comment scheduled for this meeting.
Going forward, will we have some sort of outline so parents know what to expect from here on out as like the plan develops to get the kids back into school at some point, so they know what to expect?
So I would provide parents with written communication tomorrow, and I would work with these principals around how soon we could begin to roll that kind of communication out. Again, by the beginning of next week now, I've had to reframe my timeline. Our goal is to put out some sort of a metric that talks about the indicators that we're looking at in terms of trying to bring more groups in, et cetera.
I just think it would be nice to have like some sort of guideline so they know if we reach this, then, the kids will get, more time in school or that type of thing, some sort of guideline so people know what to expect from here on out, like what we need to reach.
I think that document does that to some extent. I think it does it to some extent. I don't think it provides concrete answers because we don't know what's going to happen with certain elements that are beyond our control. But I think it does it certainly tracks the number of kids we're able to bring in small groups and those kinds of things, and reports on those to the public.
Thank you.
Okay, Rhonda, do you want to do the vote, the roll call?
Yeah, and I also want to read the motion to make sure I have it correct. I have the motion as a motion to approve the plan for the return to school as recommended by the superintendent for enriched virtual learning in grades K through 12 for all SAU 21 schools.
I think you need to identify just the schools we're talking about tonight, correct? Because as to Henry's point, I don't think this should include Winnicott.
Yes, I think the motion should include, Rhonda, that the enriched virtual learning experience is already the model being implemented at Seabrook grades 6 through 8, Northampton grades 6 through 8. I'm sorry, Seabrook grades 5 through 8. Boy, it's getting late. And at Winnicott High School. Okay. So it's really the other
Okay.
schools and grade levels.
So I'm going to add that in parentheses that the enriched virtual learning experience is already in place, and then I'll fill in the schools that it was already.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, and it looks like we have lost Jen Hubbard, and Heidi Terracina had to leave.
Heidi did write in chat, though, what her vote was.
Yeah, you guys will have to let me know if you think that's what we should put in there, or whether she's present or whatever. So I'm going to have Greg Parrish.
Very reluctantly, yes.
Nermina Peterson.
No.
Mike Rabideau.
Yes.
Leslie LaFond.
Yes.
Forrest Carter.
Yes.
Jason Farias.
No.
Jennifer Hubbard. Not present. Jim Keim.
Yes.
Henry Marsh. Henry Marsh. You're on mute, Henry.
Yes.
Jill Swayze.
No.
Jessica Brown.
No.
Sharon Gordon.
Yes.
Tony Delano.
Yes.
John Bailey.
Yes.
Greg Duffy.
No.
Tom Von Jess.
No.
Jessica Brown.
No.
Heidi Terracina. I'm going to put not present at vote.
Heidi did vote yes in the chat.
Are you guys all in agreement of that?
Sure, can you do that?
Depends
I
what
don't
the final
know.
vote
I
is.
don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I think so.
Isn't it part of the record though? It's
Yeah,
part
I thought
of
it was part of the record.
it is.
It will be listed in the minutes that, I don't know what the legality of that is though, because she's not,
I
somebody
believe
wants to advise
you
me.
have to be present to vote.
I think so.
Can't see the notes in public
Okay.
though.
Kelly Huber.
No.
Aaron Stanton.
No.
Tom Von Jess. Tom, you're muted.
Sorry about that. You already recorded my vote as a no.
I did not have that. I apologize. I have the vote recorded. Without the waiting, I have 10 yeses and 7 noes. So we have 4 Hampton Falls members here. Each vote is worth 0.75 points. And there were 2 yeses, 2 noes. Northampton, 4 members present. Votes there are also worth 0.75. And so we have 3 noes.
I believe all 4 were no.
I believe all 4 were no's.
4 were noes.
Yes.
I have a different count, Rhonda, than you had.
Yeah, I have a different count too.
Well, with that correction there, I have 9 yeses and 8 noes.
Right.
Yep.
That would,
That's what I have.
okay. Forrest Carter. With Seabrook, we had 4 members here, so the 4 members are 0.75. And there was 2 yeses, 2 noes. Southampton, there were 2 members present. Each vote counts as 1.5. Both of those were yeses. And Winnicott, we have 4 members present, which comes to a 0.75 for each vote. 3 voted yes and 1 was not present. And Mike Rabideau is also Yes, so there's 4 yeses and 1 not present.
So those votes count as what each? 0.75?
0.75.
Yeah. So if I got your weighted vote correct, I have the weighted, the portioned vote being 9 yes, 6 no.
Correct. That's what I have. Is
Can you
Hampton
repeat that?
Falls- I'm sorry?
Could you repeat that vote again? I'm sorry.
Yes. 4 Hampton Falls members voted. Each of their votes were 0.75. 2 were for, 2 were against. So that's a split vote of 1.5 yes and 1.5 no. Northampton, 4 members were present. Each of their votes were worth 0.75. All 4 voted against. That's 0 yeses, 3 votes no. Seabrook had 4 members present. No, 5 members present, I'm sorry. 1 was abstain, 2 were yes.
Oh, there wasn't an abstention. No, there were only 4 members present.
Jen, that's who I'm thinking of. It's not an abstention, it's just gone. So the 4 members, I'm sorry, is 0.75. 2 were yeses, 2 were noes. Again, it's 1.54 for the vote, 1.5 against the vote. Winnicott had 4 members present. Each vote was 0.75 in value. All 4 votes were for the motion, so that made 3 points for it. Southampton had 2 members present. Their votes were worth 1.5. They were both for, which is a total of 3 votes for it. So that adds up to 9 votes for it and 6 votes against it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that what you had, Bill?
It is.
All right. So I think that's the last actionable item in this meeting, right?
It is.
Do we have anything further to discuss?
The administration does not.
Any further comments from any board members?
Make a motion, we
Thank
adjourn.
you to everybody for their input, keeping it respectful. It's not easy and everybody has their opinions, but I think that the administration and faculty and staff will do the best that they can for this. I truly believe that.
I agree with that.
I believe Henry made a motion to end the meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay. So we want to do it. Okay. I don't know the best way to do it. We can do a roll call, or do people just want
If
to?
everybody's in agreement with that.
You know
Okay.
what? I just want to say
Okay.
one more
Thank
thing.
you.
I
All
want
right.
to say
Oh,
Okay,
Kelly
go
has
ahead.
something to say.
I really think that the residents should have had the opportunity to call in. I'm really disappointed that they were not given that opportunity. The last time that we had a call in, they were given 15 minutes and 10 minutes of that was spent with the union rep. And it really saddens me that we're making decisions on behalf of the parents and they didn't even have a right to call in and express their concerns. That's all I want to say.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. Okay. I think that brings an end to the meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.